Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, your boy Virtus here, and welcome back to my Unreal Engine 4 Legends of Zelda developer livestream. In today's video, we are going to be taking a look at how we can set up the basics for our melee combat inside of our game. So what we're going to be doing in today's video is introducing a melee weapon and a shield into our Zelda character, and when the player goes ahead and left clicks, they are going to be able to swing with their sword. And we're also going to be setting up everything for the transformation for the sword, setting up the animation blueprint, and all of that good stuff. There is loads and loads that we're going to be doing in today's video, so if you guys are having any trouble, sit back, relax, take things slow, and feel free to just watch things back. Now, I'd like to take a massive moment to say a massive thank you to all the Patreons that have made this live stream possible, and also to everyone that has been following along. Now, if you guys want some help with your project, then the best thing I can advise is to go ahead and check out our Discord server, which has over 1,000 Unreal Engine members in there, all looking to collaborate and help and all that good stuff. Now, before we go any further with the rest of the video, what I also need to mention is that you are going to need the latest version of the Zelda Files, and once again the link for this is in the description. And within the latest version, you are going to have this little folder that says well, that is for the shield. So you're going to have two textures, one for the diffuse, and then you're also going to have one for the normal map, and most importantly you've also got the model for that shield as well. Now, as far as the weapon is concerned, the actual sword, we are not going to be using a Zelda sword. Instead, what we're going to be doing is taking a sword from the Infinity Blade weapons pack, as there is loads and loads of stuff in there. So if you open up your Unreal Engine 4 marketplace, and then if you just type in Infinity Blade, give it a couple of seconds to load up, and what you will find is that there is the Infinity Blade weapons pack. So if you click on this, and within here you can see all of the different weapons that we have available. Now, none of them are specifically for Legends of Zelda, they're actually for a game that Epic Games are working on. However, there is plenty to choose from, and there is one that is similar to what we are after. But if you guys want something else, you can just choose something in here, or if you have your own model, just import it, and the process is going to be exactly the same. So what you need to do with this is just go ahead and log in if you haven't done so already, and then what you're going to do is basically just add that to your cart. It's completely free, it doesn't cost a penny. And then once you've done that, we are just going to need to add this to our project, and I'll show you how to do that in just a second, as soon as it finishes signing me into the marketplace. So give it a second here. My computer's a little bit slow, and I'm just gonna have to go back into my marketplace and just add the item again. So what we're gonna do with this is just add to project, and then choose the one that you are working on at the moment. For me, it is this one here, and I've actually already got it open. So as we add this to the project, once it's downloaded, we will start to see this being added into the content browser. So what I'm going to do for now is I'm actually going to leave this running in the background, and I'm going to take a moment to import that shield. So what I'm going to do is, within my blue Zelda folder in the bottom left in my content browser here, I'm going to go and just right click and create a new folder for the shield, and I'm going to call this link_shield. And then we're going to open this up, and then what I'm going to do is simply get my files for the shield. So that's the diffuse, the normal map, and also the model. I'm just going to select all of these and drag and drop to import these into the engine. I'm going to leave all the settings exactly as they are. They don't need to be a skeletal mesh, so I'm just going to press import, making sure I don't import the materials because I'm going to set my own one up. And then I'm just going to import this. Now what we should have is a shield which looks a bit like this. Now, as of right now, there is no material on there, or no textures, no colors, none of that stuff. So I'm going to quickly make that. So what I'm going to do is right click on my material. And then with this, I'm just going to give this the name shield underscore material. And then open this up. And then we've already got the diffuse in here. So if we apply this, we'll see that in a second in the top left. What I also need to do is go ahead and add in my normal map as well and just hook this up to the normal. And you'll see now with our little preview, if we take a look at it, there is a little bit of fake depth, which looks quite nice. And I'm just going to add one last little touch to this, which is a constant into the roughness. And this is what's going to give it that metallic, shiny look. So one constant is going to go into the metallic. Now, because this is entirely metal, this material being a shield, I'm going to set that to 1. And then with my roughness, I'm going to set this to maybe 0.3. And what we should have is a pretty cool metallic looking material. So I'm going to press apply on this now. And then open up my shield. And then in the top right here in the material slot, you probably won't be able to see it because of my camera, but inside of here, if we just change it from the world grid material to shield, so shield underscore material, and then if we zoom in, get nice and close, you can see this shield really coming to life. This is the Legends of Zelda shield. So hopefully you guys can really start to see everything coming along. So let's take a quick look back at our marketplace, and you can see that it's done what it needs to do. And in my content browser, I actually have the Infinity Blade weapons pack now. So what I'm going to do with this is just go into weapons, and then I'm going to go into blade, and then just find some swords, and we got a variety of swords that we can work with here. Now, you guys can choose any one of these. It is entirely up to you. But the one that I'm probably going to be using is going to be this one. Okay, maybe not this one. So if we just take a look, we got loads in here. So we got hero sword. Let's take a look at this. We could use that. It's entirely up to you. I'm just going to go with this. So what we need to do now then is we need to set up 2 blueprints. We need to set up 1 blueprint for the weapon, and we also need to set up a second blueprint for the shield as well. And then what we can do from there is we can take a moment to focus on attaching it to the player, and then once that's done, we can start setting up the animation. So when the player uses his left click, it's going to attack. The shield block is going to be something that we're going to do in another video, but that is for another time. So what I'm going to do is within my Zelda folder, what I'm going to do is create a new folder called blueprints, and these are going to be the blueprints that I'm creating for this Zelda game. Within here, I'm going to create a blueprint class with the type actor, and the first one is going to be Link underscore sword, and then I'm also going to create another blueprint, another actor with the name Link underscore shield. So let's start off with the sword. So open this up, double click to open it, and what we've got to do in here then is focus on the physical appearance of this sword, and then we'll set up the things for damage and all of that good stuff later on. But here we just need to add the component for the static mesh. So go to, in the top left hand corner, go to static mesh, and just give this the name sword underscore mesh. And then with this, what we're going to do is just type in sword, and we should have a bunch of swords from the Infinity Blade the Infinity Blade weapons pack. So you guys can choose any one of these. It is entirely up to you. Or the easier way to do it, if you want to be a bit more precise, is to go into your weapons folder, go to weapons, and then just go to swords. And then if we just open up one of these, so let's go ahead and roll with the Black Knight sword for now. I am going to select, actually it's fine when we've just got a static mesh. Actually, it doesn't matter too much if it's static or skeletal at this point. So I'm going to use the Black Knight sword. I'm going to select this. And then I'm actually going to delete this static mesh that we created because we won't need this. And instead, we are going to add a skeletal mesh. And because I've got that skeletal mesh with the sword selected, you can see it's already trying to do that for me. So it's trying to make a skeletal mesh using sk_blade_black knight. And now, we have now got this into our blueprint, which is perfect. Now, there's a couple of things that you need to do with this. So collision, one thing that you want to do is change it from no collision to overlap all. And the reason why I'm doing this is because you are going to need to be able to generate what is known as an overlap event. So when something overlaps this, it is going to fire off a piece of code. So having said that, make sure you also tick generate overlap events, and that is done. So moving on from there, let's make the blueprint for the shield as well now. So we've got the shield here, open this up, and all we're going to do this time, because it is a static mesh, we are going to add in a static mesh component, give this the name shield_mesh, and then with this we are just going to set this to shield link_shield, and we are going to add it in just like that. And now we've got our shiny metallic looking shield in our game. So if you guys want to see exactly what these are going to look like in your game in terms of scale and everything, you can just drag these blueprints in and you can have a little look at these. Now don't worry if they're, not big enough or anything like that just yet, because we will be changing that, and that's going to be done using the transformation on a socket as we attach it to our character in just a moment. So what we need to do now then is we need to set up a socket within the character, the skeletal mesh, which we can use to attach this sword and the shield to, so that we can start to bring it into our game, bring it into our character. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to go to my mesh folder for my link_character_rigged. We need to open up the skeletal mesh, so double click this, and then go to the skeletal view. Now within here on the left hand side we have a whole bunch of bones that we can work with. We could add a socket to one of these bones and then essentially just attach one of these items to that socket when we spawn in the blueprint, and that's exactly what we're going to be doing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and figure out the most logical place to put these. Now the sword is going to be held with the player's right arm, and then the shield is going to be on the player's left arm. So on the right hand side, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to look for a bone that I can sort of socket this to. Now I could do this to one of the fingers, but what I'm actually looking for is the hand, the right hand here. So when the fingers start moving about, it's not going to move the weapon too. The hand is going to be sort of going up and down, and then from there the sword is just going to go up and down with it. It's not going to be sort of moving along with the fingers and any of that good stuff. So with this, with the right hand, I'm going to add a socket, and this socket I'm going to give this the name sword_hold. And what we need to do now is adjust this socket so that the weapon, when it's spawned into that socket, it's going to be in the right place. And what we're going to do is add what is known as a preview mesh so that we can play around with that socket transformation, so we can, in 3D space, determine exactly where it's going to go. Now, what I'm going to do is, for the animation in the top right, so I can see roughly how the character is going to be most of the time, I am just going to set this to link_idle. So now, when I add it in, I can see, and I should be able to slip that sword into the grip of the player's hand. So if I get nice and close in here, you can see the dude, Link, he has sort of got his wrist all gripped like that, and there should be a little sword. So that's where I want to be putting it. So what I'm going to do is pause this, and then with this, I'm going to add the preview mesh. So right click on sword_hold, add the preview mesh, and the mesh that we are after is the sword that we used earlier, and that was sk_blade_black knight. And once you add that in, you've got it on your character. Now bear in mind, this is way too big. So what we're going to do is, first things first, we are going to be scaling this down quite a bit. So I'm going to drag, I'm going to hit the little white part of this and just scale it down to about that size, maybe a little bit smaller. So I'm going to turn off my snapping for the scale, give myself a bit of control, and I'm going to put it there. Now what I also need to do is rotate this. Make sure you keep your preview mesh selected, or the socket rather, and just rotate it and try and get it as close to as you can as being in that player's hand. So what you're going to have to do is just move things around, rotate it and all that good stuff, and just make sure you turn your snapping off in the top right here for rotation, translation and scale, and then just sort of drop it into the player's hand just like this. Now what you might have to do is move it up and move it this way. Just trying to get it in here as close as I can. If it's too big, then you might have to scale this, but I think if I scale this down just a tad, I think that should be about right. And then if I just make one final movement to push this down into the player's hand like that, we should be good to go. And now what I want to check is, I'm also going to need to rotate my blade as well, so that when it sort of hits the player like that, that it's going to be sort of slicing them. It's not going to be hitting them like, sort of flat. So just keep that in mind. When you're working with weapons and stuff, you got to think quite closely sort of about how it's going to hit the player, how it's going to swing. You need to anticipate every single one of these movements and try and keep it as realistic as possible. And this is something that animators are great at, and it's part of their job, just trying to think realistically the movement of everything. But don't worry about it for now, but just get it in there, get it looking a little bit like this. So when we press play, the sword should be moving in the player's hand just like that, and for me this is looking quite good. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a moment to attach this to the player inside of the game, because we got the socket. We now need to spawn this blueprint into the game when the player begins playing, and then attach it to this socket. So what we're going to do is close that, close this, and then if we go to the third person blueprints folder and open up our third person character, what we're going to do is find our code for begin play, which should at the moment just have the HUD. What we're going to do is we are going to just do a little bit of code. So the first thing that we are going to do, is going to be spawn actor from class. And the class for this is going to be link_sword. And then for the spawn transform, we are going to get socket transform. And this is going to be from the mesh. And what we're going to do, or what this is doing rather, is it is essentially just getting the transformation from that socket that we just created. So that information and that location for the sword, the scale, the rotation, it's going to get all of that for us. For the socket name, it is going to be sword_hold. Make sure this is spelt 100% correct, otherwise it will not go in correctly. If we compile this and press play, you'll notice as soon as we jumped in the game, it spawned the weapon. And the player is all the way up there for some moment, but what you will have noticed is that it spawned it at the location where it should have been, but it didn't attach it to the player, so it didn't move with the player. So you can see here it spawned it in the right hand of the player's character, but it's not staying there. So the way that we're going to do this is, so after we've spawned this, what we're going to do is a couple of things. First things first, with this sword, I want to have a reference to this. So from the return value for spawn the link sword, I'm going to promote this to a variable. And then what I'm going to do is just give this the name sword_ref. And then with this, what I'm also going to do is drag out and attach to components. And then what this is going to do is it's going to allow me to pretty much just attach this weapon that I've just spawned to my character. So what I'm going to do is, whoops, give me a second. So what I'm going to do is set the target to this, and then for the parent, that is going to be the mesh for the character, because that's what I'm attaching it to. So I'm going to drag that into the parent, and then the socket name is going to be sword_hold, which is the socket which we had earlier on. For the location, the rotation, and the scale ruling, what I'm going to do is simply set this all to snap to target, so it goes right where it should be. If we go ahead and hit compile, press play, what we should have is a sword in the player's hand. I can run around with that and all of that good stuff. Now you'll notice the position of that sword is a little bit odd. It looks exactly how we set it up, but it just looks a bit funny. That is something that you're probably just going to have to play around with and rotate later on. So now that we've got the sword in here, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to focus on getting him to swing the sword now, which is going to be where we bring in the animation blueprint and a little bit of input for that. So what I'm going to do is I am now going to add a input for that sword swing. So essentially what I want to happen now is when the player sort of swings their left hand, that needs to be instigated by using the left click on the mouse or whatever button on the controller you want that to be. Now I could just do a blueprint telling it to do it with each individual input, but instead I'm going to go to project settings, so go to edit and project settings, and I am going to do this properly instead. What I'm going to do within here is go to my inputs tab, go to action mappings and press plus to add a new one of these, and then just give this the name sword swing. And then for the inputs you can add as many as you want in here, but for now, for me, I'm just going to set this to mouse and then mouse left mouse button, just like that. So now if we open up our third person character again, what we can do is when they hit off that input, we're going to tell it to simply set a variable to true, and if that variable is true, we're going to tell it to do the sword swing animation. So what I'm going to do is, with my code here for setting up the sword, spawning it in, I'm actually going to select all of this and comment it real quick and just give it the name spawn sword, just so I know what it is. and I'm going to move this over. Now with this, if I right click in some blank space, what I'm going to do then is left click, or rather sword swing, which is our input. On pressed, I'm going to tell this to change a variable to true, and this is going to be for swinging the sword. So plus variable, so we need to add a variable, and it's going to be a boolean because it's true or false. Is the player swinging the sword, or are they not swinging the sword? So with this, with the boolean, I am going to set this to have the name swinging sword. And then with this, if I compile, I'm going to make sure the default value is set to untrue, and then on pressed, we are going to set swinging sword to true. What we're going to do after this is add a delay of the duration of that sword swing. Now we don't know how long that is at the moment, but we'll find that out from the animation in a moment. But after that, we are going to set swinging sword to untrue. And that's pretty much everything we need to do in here. Now, if we go into our animations folder, what we need to do is find a nice little slash animation for that sword and shield. So the first one I'm going to try is sword and shield _/1. We need to quickly retarget this, so just choose your link character and retarget it. And then with this, you should have an animation that looks a little bit like this, and that looks good to me for my character just swinging his sword. So what I'm going to do is, I've got that, I'm going to rename it to link _sword swing. And I'm going to open this up again, and one thing that I do want to check is the duration of this animation. It is 1.5 seconds, and I can see this down at the bottom there, and that is how long our delay should be then for swinging the sword. So set this to 1.5, and we are good. And what we're also going to do at the end here, or rather just before the delay, is print a quick string to make sure this is working, and saying that they should be swinging sword. This is just sort of like some testing that we're doing here to make sure the input's being fired off and it's doing what it should be doing, because we haven't set up the animation blueprint to work with that yet. So if we left click, you can see it is trying to tell it to swing the sword on that. So what we need to do now then is, when that variable is true, within our animation blueprint, tell it to go to a state where it's going to swing the sword, and from there we are good to go. So go into your animation blueprint. For us, that is underneath the Zelda folder. Go to mesh, link _animBP, and then in here, what we're going to do is, within our event graph, we need to get access to that variable that we just created. So as third person character, drag out, type in get swinging sword, and then with this, what we're going to do is drag out from there and promote this to a variable that we can use within our animation blueprint. Give this the name swinging sword, and then just hook this up to is falling and set that. So if we compile this now, we should have access to this variable, and if we go over to our state machine, go into the main state machine, what we need to do is add a new state from idle and from walk and run that is going to allow us to swing the sword. So drag out from idle, add a state with the name swing sword. Make sure this goes back to idle, from walk and run to swing, and then back, so it should go to and from both of these states, just like this. Open up swing sword, and what you want to do is just drag this in here for now and hook this up into the results. If we compile this, we should have a couple of errors because we haven't set up the transitional rules, but that's really simple, really easy to do, and we'll do that now. So first of all, going from idle to sword swinging, all we're going to do is just hook up swinging sword to that. Go back to the state machine, going back from sword swing to idle, we are just going to check to see whether or not swinging sword is not true. And we also need to make sure that the speed is below 10, because we need to know if it's going to the idle or if it's going to the walk and run. So we're going to use the AND boolean. So I'm going to hook this up to the bottom one, break this one, and from here we are going to get speed, and we're just going to do float less than float, and just check to see whether or not that player's movement speed is currently less than 10, and if it is, it's going to go to idle. And then if we go back to the state machine, going from walk run to swing sword, simply hook up swinging sword, compile it, that one's done, and then going back from swing sword to walk and run, from here we're going to do the same as what we did before. So check to make sure that it's not swinging the sword, and we also need to make sure this time that they are moving, you know, trying to walk and run rather. So what we're going to do is hook this up, and then from here just do float greater than float this time, and just get your speed, hook it up into the A, and then for the second one this is going to be 10. So if the speed is greater than 10, it's going to go into the states. Hit compile, all of our errors are going to go, press play, and now if we left click, you can see it's swinging my sword, and we have got the very basics of our melee combat system in there, which is quite great. Now we've got a couple of errors whereby the player is able to keep swinging if you click more than once. That is going to be something that we're going to be fixing later on. Also, he is moving his feet when he's sort of trying to swing and move at the same time, so that's also something that we can fix quite easily too. So what we're going to do for this is open up swing sword, and we are going to do layer blend per bone. And what this is going to do, if we hook up the result, and if we put our base pose as the idle animation, and the blend pose as a sword swing, what we can do is tell this in the details panel to pretty much just blend this from the waist down, for example. The blend depth, I'm going to set this to 0.5. So 0.5. And then bone name, we need to choose where the waist is for this. So I'm just going to choose, so if we open up our character, so if we open this up, go to skeletal view, and we're going to choose one from the waist. So we're just going to try and find a name for that, and I'm probably going to choose spine 1 actually. So go into here, choose spine 1, hit compile, and now what it should do is use half of each of the animations. At the moment I think I got these the wrong way round, so I'm just gonna swap these round, so that one in there, that one in there, compile this, press play. No, it's definitely the wrong way round, so something is going wrong. I did have it right. I shouldn't have been using idle for whatever reason. What I should have been using is my walk and run blend space instead. So hook up your walk and run blend space into there, that into there, and then speed in here, direction in here. And what should happen if we compile this, press play now, run and try and swing our sword, it's swinging the sword, and it's also doing the running and all of that good stuff at the same time. It's a little bit janky, but that's something that we're going to be fixing later on.
but hopefully for now you guys are starting to see your Zelda game come to life. I'm going to end off the video here. We have got lots more that we need to work on, but our character is looking good. Once again, if you guys need any additional support, you can get that within the Discord server. Massive thank you to all the Patreons that have made this developer livestream possible, and also if you want the completed Zelda game, the project files for that within Unreal Engine, you can unlock that on Patreon. You will get the link to that. But anyway guys, enjoy the rest of your day, stay awesome, keep curating. Your boy Virtus signing out. Peace.
This video was made possible by my supporters on Patreon. If you want more videos like this, check out my Patreon page using the link in the description. To stay up to date on new releases, make sure you follow us on social media.